When the stranger from another universe awakened amid the scrap fields, the Empire trembled without knowing why. His power to command not just metal, but the very currents of Kyber energy itself disturbed the Force in ways neither Jedi nor Sith had foreseen. Imperial warships found their hulls twisting against their will. Stormtrooper armor became death traps for their wearers. Even Vader himself discovered a presence that bent reality through different laws. What happens when a man who has survived one world's genocide finds himself in a galaxy already crushed beneath an Emperor's boot? The atmosphere crackled with magnetic distortion as the Imperial scrap field of Raxus Prime trembled beneath an unknown force. Scavengers and droids scattered as tons of metal debris began to float, suspended in defiance of gravity. A lone figure emerged from the center of the disturbance, his consciousness still reeling from displacement. Eric Lanesher, master of magnetism, opened his eyes to an unfamiliar sky filled with strange stars and the hulking shadows of derelict starships. This was not Earth. This was not even his galaxy. His body still ached from the cosmic anomaly that had torn him from his reality, a convergence of energies that had shredded the boundaries between universes. Now, surrounded by mountains of metal and technological waste, Magneto raised his hand experimentally. The response was immediate and powerful. Countless fragments of scrap metal rose around him, forming a protective orbit as his powers reached out to sense the new world. The metal here felt different exotic alloys with properties he had never encountered, yet they sang to his magnetic senses with voices both alien and familiar. Most curious was a strange crystalline element embedded in various devices that resonated with an energy not unlike his own mutant abilities. It was as if he could feel the galaxy itself through the metal, a vast network of power and possibility. Imperial Scout. Troopers observing from a nearby ridge quickly activated their comlinks. Command. We have an anomaly in Sector 7, possible Force user with unprecedented telekinetic abilities. Requesting immediate backup. Their white armor gleamed in the dying light of Raxus Prime's setting sun as they raised their blasters. Magneto sensed the metal in their weapons before he saw the troopers. With a casual flick of his wrist, the blasters were torn from their hands and dismantled in mid-air, components spinning in a perfect demonstration of his fine control. The troopers backed away, reaching for their sidearms, but those too were yanked away. "I mean no immediate harm," Magneto announced, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had survived genocide and war. "But I will not be threatened. Tell your superiors that this territory is now under my protection." One brave trooper stood his ground. "This is Imperial territory by order of Emperor Palpatine. Surrender now or face the consequences." Magneto smiled coldly. "I have faced dictators before. Your Emperor does not impress me." With a gesture, he compacted the troopers' helmets slightly, not enough to crush their heads, but enough to render them unconscious as the metal pressed against vulnerable pressure points. They collapsed to the ground, their white armor now making them look like discarded dolls. Eric turned his attention to the vast fields of scrap stretching in every direction. It was a treasure trove of resources for a man with his abilities. Already, he could sense the potential, the ships that could be rebuilt, the weapons that could be forged, the sanctuary that could be created. He had been dropped into this galaxy without explanation, but perhaps not without purpose. In the distance, a small group of scavengers watched in awe, their survival instincts warring with desperate curiosity. Magneto sensed the metal tools and implants they carried and extended his awareness toward them. One of them, a weathered Rhodian with cybernetic enhancements, cautiously approached. "Who are you?" the Rhodian asked in accented basic. "Some new kind of Jedi?" "I am Magneto," Eric replied, tasting the strange word the alien had used. "What is a Jedi?" The Rhodian's large, multifaceted eyes widened. "You do not know the Jedi? The Force users. The Empire hunted them to extinction for their powers. Powers not unlike what you just displayed." Magneto considered this. "Then this Empire and I already have irreconcilable differences. I have witnessed genocide before. I will not stand by and watch another." He paused, looking at the small group of outcasts. "Tell me everything about this galaxy, this empire. I need to understand what I'm facing." As the Rhodian explained the fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire, and the ongoing rebellion, Magneto listened intently. The parallels to his own world were striking: a powerful regime oppressing those deemed different, a resistance fighting against overwhelming odds, and beings with extraordinary abilities persecuted for their gifts. It was as if the universe had a cruel sense of humor, depositing him into yet another war against fascism. "And these crystals," Magneto interrupted, extracting a small, glowing fragment from the scrap heap. "What are they?" "Kyber crystals," the Rhodian answered. "They power the Jedi lightsabers and the Empire's weapons. They're connected to the Force somehow, very valuable." Magneto felt the Kyber resonate with his powers. Unlike ordinary metal, these crystals possessed an energy signature that interacted with his magnetic fields in unexpected ways. It was almost as if the crystal was conscious, responding to his manipulation with its own subtle will. The sensation was both exhilarating and unsettling. "I need more of these," he decided, "and information. Your Empire will soon discover that they face a new kind of opponent." Within days, Magneto had established a crude but functional base of operations by restructuring the hull of a crashed Star Destroyer. The massive vessel had been partially buried in the scrap field, but Magneto had simply raised it from its grave, reforming its twisted metal into a fortress. The local scavengers, oppressed by imperial quotas and brutal enforcers, had quickly aligned themselves with the powerful stranger who offered protection. Through their knowledge and the imperial databases salvaged from the Star Destroyer, Magneto learned of the galaxy's political landscape, its technology, and most importantly, the nature of the Force. While not the same as his mutant abilities, this cosmic energy seemed to follow similar principles of connection and balance. The Kyber crystals, in particular, fascinated him. They amplified his magnetic powers in ways he was only beginning to understand. Imperial reinforcements arrived within the week, a full contingent of stormtroopers and a squad of death troopers, accompanied by 2 Imperial officers. They established a content perimeter around Magneto's growing domain, their AT-ST walkers stomping through piles of scrap metal as they advanced toward the repurposed Star Destroyer. From the command bridge, Magneto watched their approach with detached interest. The lead officer used a portable holocommunicator to project his image. "This is Commander Valix Kane of the Imperial Security Bureau. You are harboring fugitives and have assaulted Imperial personnel. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Magneto stepped onto a makeshift balcony he had formed from the Star Destroyer's hull. With a flourish of his hand, he activated the magnetic fields he had been cultivating. The ground beneath the Imperial forces trembled as thousands of metal fragments rose into the air. The stormtroopers fired their blasters, but Magneto simply redirected the energy bolts with precise magnetic fields, sending them harmlessly into the sky. "I have been threatened by better men than you," Magneto replied, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Men with weapons far deadlier than these toys." With a sharp gesture, he targeted the AT-ST walkers. Their metal frames groaned as Magneto's power enveloped them, twisting their leg joints and crushing their weapon systems. The pilots screamed as their vehicles collapsed, metal folding in on itself like paper. The stormtroopers broke formation, some firing wildly while others retreated. Commander Kine stood his ground, his face pale but determined. "The Emperor will hear of this. He has dealt with Force users before. Your powers won't save you from his wrath." Magneto descended slowly, levitating on the metal components of his makeshift armor. He landed directly before the commander, who, to his credit, did not flinch. "I look forward to meeting your Emperor," Magneto said softly. "But first, I believe you have something I need." With a gesture, he extracted the commander's code cylinder and datapad. The locations of Kyber crystal deposits and Imperial research facilities. "Thank you for your cooperation." The commander's eyes widened as he realized the implications. "You wouldn't dare attack an Imperial facility." It would be suicide. Magneto smiled thinly. I have faced extinction before, Commander. It was not I who perished. With another gesture, he immobilized the remaining Imperial forces by manipulating the metal in their armor and weapons. Return to your Emperor. Tell him Raxus Prime is now under new management. And should he wish to negotiate, I am willing to listen. Otherwise, he will find me a most formidable enemy. As the defeated Imperials were allowed to retreat with their wounded, Magneto turned to the gathered scavengers, who now looked to him with a mixture of awe and hope. This is only the beginning, he announced. For too long, you have lived among the Empire's discards. Now, we will use these very discards to build something new, a haven for the persecuted, a fortress against tyranny, and a force that even an Emperor will learn to fear. A cheer rose from the crowd as Magneto reached out with his powers, lifting a massive Imperial insignia from the wreckage and crushing it into a compact sphere. With deliberate showmanship, he reshaping it into a new symbol, a stylized helmet similar to the one he had worn on Earth, but with design elements that would resonate in this new galaxy. From this day forward, he declared, Raxus Prime is no longer a dumping ground. It is the birthplace of the Magnetic Order. News of the mysterious metal bender spread quickly through Imperial channels, eventually reaching the highest levels of command. On the bridge of the Superstar Destroyer Executor, Darth Vader stood motionless as the hologram of Commander Kane finished his report. The subject appeared to manipulate metal without any visible force techniques, Lord Vader. No lightsaber, no traditional telekinesis. It was as if the metal itself obeyed him. Vader's mechanical breathing filled the silence that followed. Did you sense the force in this being? I'm not sensitive to such things, my lord, Kane admitted, but our instruments detected unusual energy patterns unlike anything in our databases. Vader turned to gaze out at the stars. The Emperor has foreseen a disturbance in the Force, a presence neither Jedi nor Sith, yet powerful enough to upset the balance. His fist clenched. Prepare my shuttle. I will investigate this anomaly personally. As Vader departed, the Emperor himself sat in his throne room on Coruscant, eyes closed in deep meditation. The dark side swirled around him as he probed the cosmic disturbance that had manifested on Raxus Prime. What he sensed was unlike any Force user he had encountered, a mind of tremendous will and power, tempered by suffering and driven by purpose. It was not aligned with the light or dark sides of the Force. It existed outside that ancient dichotomy. A thin smile crossed Palpatine's withered features. How interesting, he murmured to himself. Perhaps we have found a new piece for our grand game. Meanwhile, on the remote jungle world of Ajan Kloss, a secret rebel outpost received an encrypted transmission from an Alliance intelligence operative on Raxus Prime. General Leia Organa reviewed the footage of the metal-bending stranger with growing concern. Could he be a Jedi we don't know about? Asked Major Bren Derlin, standing beside her. Leia shook her head. No Jedi I've ever heard of had powers like this. Luke would know better, but he's still searching for Jedi artifacts on Ossus. Whoever he is, he's no friend of the Empire, observed Admiral Akbar. That could make him a potential ally. Or a dangerous wildcard, Leia countered. Power like that doesn't come without a price. We need to make contact before the Empire decides to eliminate the threat. She turned to her communications officer. Prepare the Ghost for immediate departure. Contact Captain Syndulla. If anyone can approach this Magneto without triggering hostile action, it's her. As the various factions of the galaxy adjusted their strategies to account for this new player, Magneto himself was rapidly expanding his understanding and control of his new environment. The kyber crystals he had collected enhanced his magnetic abilities in unexpected ways, allowing him to perceive and manipulate energy fields that had previously been beyond his reach. Working with a salvaged Imperial scientist who had been discarded for her dangerous ideas about kyber crystal applications, Magneto developed a network of amplifiers throughout his growing fortress. Dr. Elara Rivane, a brilliant but ostracized researcher, had found in Magneto a patron who appreciated her unorthodox approach to energy manipulation. "The crystals don't just conduct energy," she explained, adjusting a complex apparatus where kyber fragments orbited a central core. "They're semi-sentient, attuned to what some call the Force. Your magnetic fields seem to resonate with them on a fundamental level I've never observed before." Magneto passed his hand over the floating crystals, feeling their response to his powers. "On my world, I could control magnetic fields, manipulate metal down to its molecular structure. But these crystals, they extend my reach into new domains." He demonstrated by causing the air itself to ionize around the crystals, creating pathways of visible energy that he could direct with precision. "It's as if they translate your abilities into the language of the Force," Dr. Rivane suggested, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. "Neither purely technological nor mystical, but something in between." This hybrid approach to power became the foundation of Magneto's strategy. Unlike the Jedi or Sith, who relied primarily on their connection to the Force or the Empire, which depended on brute technological might, Magneto fused both approaches. His fortress on Raxus Prime grew into a marvel of magnetic engineering, a braid, constantly shifting citadel, where walls flowed like liquid when needed and hardened to impenetrable barriers against attack. The scavengers and outcasts who had rallied to his cause were transformed as well. Those with cybernetic enhancements found their capabilities amplified by Magneto's magnetic fields. Others were equipped with salvaged and repurposed Imperial tech, modified to respond to specific magnetic signatures. Within months, what had begun as a ragtag band of survivors evolved into a disciplined force that the local Imperial garrison could no longer ignore. Magneto's influence expanded beyond Raxus Prime as well. Small bands of his followers infiltrated nearby systems, targeting Imperial mining operations and kyber processing facilities. They struck with precision, using magnetically enhanced stealth technology to evade detection until the moment of attack. These raids served multiple purposes, gathering resources, disrupting Imperial supply lines, and spreading whispers of the magnetic order throughout the sector. Imperial propaganda dismissed these attacks as the work of common rebels, but those who witnessed Magneto's followers in action knew differently. They moved with the coordination of a single organism, their weapons and armor responding to unseen commands, metal flowing and reshaping to meet each tactical need. Some claimed they could even deflect blaster bolts without shields, creating invisible barriers of force that no Imperial weapon could penetrate. 6 months after his arrival in the galaxy, Magneto stood on the highest spire of his fortress, gazing at the stars. His meditation was interrupted by the approach of a scout ship bearing news from one of his raiding parties. "Master Magneto," reported Coda, a Zabrak whose horns had been augmented with magnetic receptors of Magneto's design. "We've intercepted Imperial communications about a high-value convoy passing near the Kashyyyk system. They're transporting kyber crystals from the mines on Jeddah to a classified research facility." "How heavily guarded?" Magneto asked, his mind already calculating possibilities. 2 Star Destroyers and a full TIE fighter escort, Coda replied. But that's not all. The communications mentioned oversight by someone called Lord Vader. Magneto's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He had heard much about this Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, a being of considerable power and ruthlessness. Some of the stories reminded him uncomfortably of himself in his darker moments. "Prepare our fastest vessels," he commanded after a moment's consideration. "Select our best operatives. If this Vader is as formidable as they say, I wish to observe him personally before we engage." As Coda departed to carry out his orders, Magneto returned his gaze to the stars. The pattern of constellations was still unfamiliar, a constant reminder of how far he was from home. Yet in the 6 months since his arrival, he had carved out a domain that rivaled anything he had built on Earth. Here, there were no X-Men to oppose him, no Charles Xavier to preach moderation and coexistence with oppressors. Perhaps this is where I was always meant to be, he murmured to himself, the metal components of his armor shifting subtly in response to his thoughts. A galaxy that needs reshaping by a stronger hand. 2 days later, Magneto's interceptor fleet, a collection of modified Imperial shuttles and salvaged light cruisers, lay in wait behind a small moon in the Kashyyyk system. Their hulls had been treated with a magnetic coating that absorbed scanner emissions, rendering them nearly invisible to Imperial detection systems. Magneto himself commanded the lead vessel, a hybrid craft of his own design that incorporated kyber-focusing arrays into its structure. Through these arrays, he could extend his magnetic senses far beyond their normal range, feeling the subtle distortions in space created by large metal objects. "They're coming," he announced, sensing the massive star destroyers before they emerged from hyperspace. 3 capital ships, not 2. They've added additional security. Right on cue, a trio of Imperial vessels materialized against the backdrop of stars, 2 standard Imperial-class star destroyers flanking a larger, more menacing vessel. "That's an Imperial superstar destroyer," whispered Dr. Ryvane, who had insisted on accompanying the mission to observe the effects of kyber crystals in combat situations. "The Executor, Vader's personal flagship." Magneto absorbed this information with calm deliberation. The massive warships represented a level of firepower he had not yet tested himself against. Even with his enhanced abilities, a direct confrontation would be costly. But then, he had not survived this long by engaging in fair fights. "Launch the probe droids," he ordered. "I want to observe their security protocols before we make our move." The modified probe droids slipped away from the Raven the Go, hidden fleet, their systems tuned to Magneto's magnetic signature. Through them, he could not only gather visual data but also directly sense the metal components of the Imperial ships, creating a detailed 3-dimensional map of their structures, weaknesses, and the kyber crystals they transported. As the data flowed back, Magneto's confidence grew. The star destroyers were marvels of engineering, but to his magnetic senses, they were merely elaborate arrangements of metal complex, but ultimately subject to his will. The kyber crystal shipment was even more distinct, glowing in his perception like a beacon of potential energy. "There," he said, pointing to a holographic representation of the convoy. "The crystals are being held in magnetically sealed containers in the main cargo bay of the lead star destroyer. Security consists of 2 platoons of stormtroopers and—" He paused, his senses detecting something unusual. "There's a presence on the command ship, different from the others, surrounded by a field of energy I cannot clearly penetrate." "Vader," Dr. Ryvane confirmed. "The Sith Lord's connection to the dark side of the Force creates disturbances in standard energy readings. Your magnetic senses must be detecting his Force presence." Magneto considered this new variable. "Can he sense us as well?" Before Dr. Ryvane could answer, the lead star destroyer suddenly altered course, turning toward the moon, concealing Magneto's fleet. TIE fighters began launching from its hangar bays in attack formation. "I believe that answers your question," Dr. Ryvane said grimly. Magneto's expression hardened. "So be it. If they wish to witness my power firsthand, I shall not disappoint them." He extended his hands, channeling his magnetic powers through the ship's kyber arrays. "All vessels, prepare to engage. Operation Lodestone begins now." The battle erupted with unexpected ferocity as Magneto's fleet emerged from hiding. The Imperial forces responded with textbook precision, TIE fighters swarming toward the smaller vessels, while the star destroyers moved to establish firing positions with their turbolasers. What the Imperial commanders failed to anticipate was the nature of their opponent. As the first volley of turbolaser fire reached Magneto's position, he raised his hands and the energy beams curved away, redirected by powerful magnetic fields into empty space. The TIE fighters, their hulls constructed primarily of metal alloys, suddenly found themselves fighting their own control systems as Magneto's influence disrupted their flight paths. "Impressive," murmured Magneto as he observed the chaos unfolding before him. With each passing moment, his understanding of the Imperial vessels grew more refined. He could feel the movement of every turbolift, the rotation of every turbolaser battery, the power fluctuations in their reactor cores. It was like reading a complex but ultimately comprehensible text. Through the probe, droids still attached to the Star Destroyers, he extended his awareness to the Kyber crystal containers. They were even more responsive to his powers than he had anticipated, resonating with each magnetic pulse he sent. With careful precision, he began to weaken the magnetic locks, securing them to the deck. Aboard the Executor's bridge, Darth Vader stood silently as reports of system failures and inexplicable phenomena poured in from the escort vessels. "My lord," reported Admiral Piet, "the TIE squadrons are reporting loss of control. The lead Star Destroyer's weapon systems are targeting each other, and their shields are fluctuating wildly." Vader's mechanical breathing remained steady. It is as the Emperor foresaw. This being does not use the Force as we understand it, yet achieves similar effects. He turned to face the main viewport where Magneto's flagship was visible, surrounded by a visible distortion as it manipulated the very fabric of space around it. "Launch my personal TIE Advanced," Vader commanded. "I will confront this anomaly myself." As Vader's distinctive fighter launched from the Executor, Magneto sensed the approach of a smaller vessel with a uniquely powerful energy signature. The dark presence he had detected earlier was now concentrated in this single craft, moving with unnatural precision through the chaos of battle. "So the Enforcer comes to challenge me personally," Magneto observed, a hint of anticipation in his voice. He turned to his bridge crew. "Continue with the extraction of the Kyber shipment. I will deal with our distinguished visitor." Magneto stepped onto a launch platform he had designed specifically for his use, essentially a flat metal disc that responded to his magnetic powers. As the platform detached from the flagship, he encased himself in a protective magnetic bubble and launched into space to meet Vader's approaching fighter. The two vessels circled each other in the void between the fleets, a moment of stillness amid furious battle. Magneto studied the TIE Advanced with interest. Its design was more refined than the standard fighters, with advanced weapon systems and a reinforced hull. More intriguing was its pilot, whose presence radiated cold purpose and controlled rage emotions Magneto recognized intimately. Vader's fighter suddenly accelerated, green laser cannons firing with deadly accuracy. The bolts streaked toward Magneto, only to scatter against his magnetic shields. Magneto responded by reaching out to grasp the fighter's metal frame, intending to crush it as he had done with countless vehicles on Earth. To his surprise, the fighter resisted. Not completely, he could feel the metal straining under his power, but enough to indicate that something was counteracting his abilities. The cockpit section remained entirely untouched, protected by what could only be described as a bubble of pure will. The Force, Magneto realized, recalling what he had learned about this energy that pervaded the galaxy. Vader was using it to shield himself, creating a counter-pressure to Magneto's magnetic assault. The standoff lasted only seconds before Vader abruptly changed tactics. The TIE Advanced spun away, then looped back for another attack run. This time, instead of firing its weapons, the fighter executed a series of impossible maneuvers, closing distance faster than any normal pilot could manage. As Vader closed in, Magneto felt a sudden pressure around his throat, invisible fingers constricting his airway from a distance. It was a sensation he had never experienced before, a direct attack that bypassed his magnetic defenses. Instinctively, Magneto responded by intensifying the electromagnetic field around his body. The pressure eased slightly as his enhanced field interfered with Vader's force grip. Seeking to capitalize on this discovery, Magneto channeled more power through the Kyber crystals embedded in his armor. The resulting pulse of energy created a shockwave that disrupted Vader's concentration, breaking the force choke entirely. Both combatants were pushed apart by the release of energy, their vessels tumbling momentarily before stabilizing. As they regained control, a new development drew their attention. The lead Star Destroyer's cargo bay doors had been forcibly opened, and the kyber crystal containers were floating free, pulled by Magneto's magnetic forces toward his waiting transport ships. Simultaneously, the Star Destroyer itself was beginning to show signs of structural failure as key support beams buckled under precisely targeted magnetic stress. Vader observed the extraction with cold calculation, then made a decision. His fighter turned away from Magneto and accelerated toward the compromised Star Destroyer, its engines burning at maximum capacity. Whatever Vader had planned, Magneto did not intend to allow it to succeed. Focusing his powers, Magneto reached for the TIE Advanced once more. This time, instead of attempting to crush it entirely, he targeted specific components: the control surfaces, the weapon systems, the engine housing, areas where Vader's force protection might be weaker. The fighter shuddered, its previously graceful flight becoming erratic. Still, it continued toward the Star Destroyer with grim determination. Magneto increased the pressure, feeling resistance from Vader's force powers, but gradually overcoming it through sheer magnetic dominance. Just as the fighter's systems began to fail catastrophically, Magneto felt a sudden surge in the force energies surrounding Vader. The Dark Lord had apparently decided that his craft was expendable. The cockpit hatch blew outward, and Vader himself emerged into the vacuum of space. Magneto watched in astonishment as the black-armored figure propelled himself through space without any visible propulsion system, moving directly toward the Star Destroyer through will alone. The sight was both impressive and unnerving, a demonstration of power that Magneto had not anticipated. "All vessels, accelerate the extraction," Magneto commanded over the comlink. "Prepare to jump to hyperspace on my mark." He had what he came for, the kyber crystals, and had confirmed that this Vader was indeed a formidable opponent. A strategic withdrawal was now the prudent course. As Magneto's fleet consolidated around the captured kyber shipment, the damaged Star Destroyer began to list heavily to one side. Its reactor containment systems were failing, creating a cascade of explosions along its hull. The second Star Destroyer moved to evacuation positions, while the Executor maintained a threatening but cautious distance. Vader reached the failing Star Destroyer and disappeared through a breach in its hull. Moments later, the vessel's descent into catastrophic failure mysteriously slowed. Magneto could sense massive internal structures being held together by sheer force of will, Vader's will, staving off the inevitable just long enough for escape pods to launch. A powerful adversary indeed, Magneto acknowledged quietly. And one who values the lives of his forces despite his reputation. It was a quality he had not expected in an Imperial enforcer, and it gave him pause. The moment of reflection was brief. With the kyber crystals secured and the Imperial forces in disarray, Magneto gave the order to withdraw. His fleet formed up around the transport ships carrying their precious cargo and accelerated away from the battle zone. As they reached the jump point, Magneto took one last look at the scene behind them. The Executor had moved to retrieve Vader and evacuate the remaining crew from the crippled Star Destroyer. On its bridge, Magneto knew the Dark Lord would be contemplating this encounter just as he was assessing strengths, weaknesses, and future strategies. They had tested each other today, and both had learned valuable lessons. As his fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Magneto allowed himself a moment of ardent satisfaction. His first direct confrontation with the Empire's most feared enforcer had ended in a tactical victory. But more importantly, it had provided crucial insights into the nature of the Force and how it interacted with his magnetic powers. Such knowledge would be invaluable in the conflicts to come. Back on Raxus Prime, Magneto stood before a holographic display showing tactical data from the Kashyyyk operation. His lieutenants gathered around him, analyzing the battle from various perspectives. "The kyber crystals have been secured in the central vault," reported Coda. "Doctor, Rivane estimates we captured enough to power our planned amplification network for the entire sector." Magneto nodded, his attention focused on a detailed scan of Vader's TIE Advanced. What have we learned about our adversary's capabilities? Doctor. Ravain stepped forward, gesturing to energy readings displayed beside the fighter's schematics. Lord Vader appears to be a nexus of force energy, capable of manipulating objects and exerting pressure without physical contact. Similar to your magnetic abilities in effect, but different in mechanism. His armor contains significant metallic components, added another lieutenant, a former Imperial engineer. Yet you reported difficulty affecting it directly. His connection to this force protects him, Magneto concluded, creating a counterfield that resists my magnetic manipulation. A formidable defense, but not impenetrable. He turned to face his assembled followers. We must adapt our strategies accordingly. The meeting continued late into the night as Magneto outlined his vision for the coming months. The successful operation against Vader's convoy had demonstrated both their capabilities and limitations. Now, they would expand their influence, targeting not just Imperial military assets, but also their political infrastructure. The Empire rules through fear and centralized control, Magneto explained. We will disrupt their empire, communications, interfere with their surveillance networks, and provide havens for those they persecute. Every success will bring more to our cause. As his lieutenants departed with their assignments, Magneto remained alone with Dr. Ravain, who had become his closest advisor in this new world. You faced Vader directly, she said, her voice betraying a hint of concern. Few who do so survive the encounter. Magneto's expression remained impassive. He is powerful, but not omnipotent. His force abilities and my magnetic powers appear to exist in a state of tension, neither completely nullifying the other. And the Emperor? Intelligence suggests his mastery of the dark side far exceeds Vader's. Then he too shall learn that magnetism is a fundamental force of the universe, Magneto replied with quiet confidence. One that existed before empires and will endure after they crumble to dust. As the Kyber crystals from the raid were integrated into Magneto's growing network of power amplifiers, the magnetic field surrounding Raxus Prime strengthened exponentially. Ships passing through nearby systems reported navigation errors and unexplained sensor phenomena. Imperial probe droids sent to monitor the situation failed to report back, their systems corrupted by intense magnetic interference. On Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine received Vader's report on the Kashyyyk incident with unusual patience. While the loss of a valuable Kyber shipment would normally provoke his rage, the Emperor seemed almost pleased by the development. So you have encountered this Magneto directly, Palpatine mused, his withered fingers steepled before him. Tell me, my friend, what did you sense in him? Vader knelt before his master, his mechanical breathing echoing in the vast throne room. Power, my master, considerable power but unfocused, undisciplined. He does not draw upon the Force as we do, yet achieves effects that mirror Force abilities. And his mind? His purpose? Driven by conviction, he believes himself righteous, a protector of the oppressed. Vader's tone suggested he found such idealism contemptible. Yet I sensed darkness in him as well, a willingness to destroy those who oppose his vision. Palpatine smiled thinly, not unlike yourself once, Lord Vader. Or perhaps even now. He rose from his throne and moved to gaze out at the endless cityscape of Coruscant. This being represents both opportunity and threat. His power could serve the Empire well if properly directed. He will not be turned easily, Vader warned. His will is formidable. All the more reason to try, Palpatine replied. Dispatch Grand Admiral Thrawn to assess this situation. His unique perspective may provide insights even your considerable abilities cannot. Vader bowed his head in acknowledgement. And if Thrawn determines Magneto cannot be turned? Palpatine's expression hardened. Then we shall demonstrate the true power of the dark side. This interloper may command metal and energy, but we command the fate of the galaxy itself. As the Empire mobilized its response to the growing magnetic order, another player entered the game. The Ghost, a modified VCX-100 light freighter serving the Rebel Alliance, slipped through Imperial blockades to approach Raxus Prime. Its captain, the skilled Twi'lek pilot Hera Syndulla, had extensive experience dealing with unusual force phenomena and powerful individuals. "We're being scanned," reported Sabine Wren from the co-pilot's seat. The Mandalorian explosives expert studied the unusual sensor readings with professional interest. "But it's not like any Imperial scan I've seen. I don't know, it feels like the ship itself is being examined, molecule by molecule." "That would be our mysterious metal bender," Hera replied, maintaining her course steady. "Remember, we're here to talk, not fight." General Organa was very clear about that. The comms system suddenly activated without their input, a deep, cultured voice filling the cockpit. "Unidentified vessel, you are entering protected airspace. State your purpose or be turned back." Hera exchanged glances with Sabine before responding. "This is Captain Hera Syndulla of the Rebel Alliance. We seek audience with the one called Magneto on behalf of our leadership." A pause followed, then, "The rebellion. So the rumors of organized resistance against the Empire are true." The voice sounded almost amused. "Very well, Captain Syndulla. You may approach the coordinates being transmitted to your navigation system. Any deviation will be considered hostile action." As the Ghost followed the provided flight path, the crew stared in amazement at the transformation of Raxus Prime. What had once been a chaotic scrapyard was now an organized fortress city. Massive metal structures rose from the wasteland, their surfaces gleaming with an unnatural sheen. Defensive emplacements tracked the Ghost's progress, some conventional in design, others unlike anything the rebels had encountered. Most impressive was the central citadel, a towering construct of seamlessly flowing metal that seemed to defy structural logic. Parts of it shifted and reconfigured even as they watched, responding to unseen commands. "By the Force," whispered Sabine. "He built all this in less than a year? From junk?" The Ghost was directed to a landing platform that extended from the citadel's midsection specifically to receive them. As they touched down, Hera noticed that the platform itself seemed to adapt to their ship's configuration, metal flowing to create perfect docking connections. "Stay sharp," she instructed her crew as they prepared to disembark. "We're here as diplomats, but be ready for anything." When the Ghost's ramp lowered, they were met not by armed guards, but by a single figure, tall, imposing, clad in armor of deep crimson and royal purple with a flowing cape. His helmet, reminiscent of ancient warrior designs yet distinctly alien to this galaxy, framed a face of stern nobility and unwavering purpose. "Captain Syndulla," Magneto greeted them, his voice matching the one from the communication. "Welcome to the sanctuary of the Magnetic Order. I am Magneto, though you already know this." His gaze moved over the assembled crew, assessing each member with penetrating intensity. "You have traveled far and taken considerable risk to reach me. Your cause must be significant." Hera stepped forward, meeting his gaze directly. "The Rebel Alliance fights for freedom against Imperial tyranny. We've heard of your confrontations with the Empire and thought perhaps our interests might align." A slight smile crossed Magneto's features. "Freedom is indeed a noble cause, Captain. One I have dedicated my life to in more than one reality." He gestured toward the interior of the citadel. "Come, we have much to discuss." As the rebel delegation followed Magneto through the corridors of his fortress, they witnessed the scope of his operation. Beings of dozens of species worked with purpose at various stations. Some wore uniforms of Magneto's design, while others maintained their cultural attire augmented with technological enhancements. All showed a level of discipline and dedication that impressed even the veteran rebels. "Your organization is more extensive than our intelligence suggested," Hera observed carefully. "The Magnetic Order grows daily," Magneto confirmed. "Many of my followers were once victims of Imperial persecution, political dissidents, Force sensitives who escaped the purges, species deemed subhuman by Imperial doctrine." His tone hardened at these last words. revealing a personal anger that transcended mere political opposition. They entered a chamber dominated by a circular table formed from what appeared to be a single piece of flowing metal. As they took their seats, holographic displays activated, showing detailed maps of the sector and Imperial deployment patterns. "I understand you wish to propose an alliance," Magneto began without preamble. "Before we proceed, I should clarify my position. I oppose the Empire not merely for its policies, but for its fundamental philosophy. The subjugation of the different, the elevation of human superiority, the crushing of individual potential in service to collective conformity." Hera nodded. "Those are values the Alliance shares. We fight for a free galaxy where all beings can live without fear of persecution." "A noble sentiment," Magneto acknowledged. "But I have heard such promises before from well-intentioned leaders who lacked the strength to enforce their ideals when challenged." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What power does your alliance possess that could stand against the Imperial war machine?" Sabine interjected, her Mandalorian pride evident. "We've won significant victories against the Empire. The Battle of Scarif, the destruction of the Death Star." "Isolated successes," Magneto interrupted, though not unkindly. "Tactical victories in a strategic struggle that spans the galaxy." He leaned forward, his presence somehow filling the room despite his measured tone. "I do not question your courage or conviction, only your capacity to achieve lasting change." Hera met his challenge directly. "And what is your alternative? You've created an impressive domain here, but the Empire controls millions of star systems. Even with your remarkable abilities, can you oppose them all?" Magneto's expression remained composed, but a spark of appreciation showed in his eyes at her directness. "A fair question, Captain Syndulla. My strategy is not mere confrontation but transformation. The Empire relies on technology starships, weapons, communications arrays, all constructed primarily of metal alloys that respond to my will." He gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show a network of structures spreading across the sector. "These are amplification nodes I have established throughout Imperial territory. Each contains kyber crystals attuned to my magnetic signature. Together, they form a web of influence that grows stronger each day." The implications were staggering. Hera and her crew exchanged glances as they realized what Magneto was describing: not just a resistance movement, but a fundamental rewiring of Imperial infrastructure itself. "You're creating an alternative system of power," Hera said slowly. "One that could potentially render Imperial technology unreliable or even useless within its range." "Precisely," Magneto confirmed. "Where the rebellion strikes at the Empire's military assets, I attack the foundations of their technological superiority." His gaze swept over the rebels. "This is why I believe an alliance between us would be formidable. Your conventional forces, combined with my unique capabilities, could challenge the Empire on multiple fronts simultaneously." The strategic logic was sound, yet Hera sensed something beneath the proposal, a philosophical divergence that could not be easily reconciled. "What happens after?" she asked. "If we succeed in defeating the Empire, what system of governance do you envision?" A shadow passed across Magneto's features. "I have seen democracies fail to protect their most vulnerable citizens. I have watched peaceful coexistence degenerate into persecution and genocide." His voice remained controlled, but carried the weight of personal tragedy. "The new order must have the strength to enforce its principles against those who would resurrect old hatreds." Hera recognized the dangerous path such thinking could lead down. The Alliance fights to restore the Republic, a government of laws, not individuals, no matter how powerful or well-intentioned. And if your Republic fails to protect the different, the gifted, the other from those who fear what they do not understand, Magneto challenged. "What then, Captain? Will you watch history repeat itself with diplomatic protests and strongly worded condemnations?" The tension in the room thickened as two visions of resistance and of the future confronted each other. Neither entirely wrong, neither completely right, both shaped by different experiences of oppression and different hopes for liberation. Before Hera could respond, an alert sounded throughout the citadel. Magneto's attention shifted instantly, his hand rising as if to feel something in the air itself. "Imperial forces have entered the system," he announced. "A significant fleet, accompanied by an unusual vessel of Chiss design." His eyes narrowed. "It seems our discussion must be continued another time, Captain Syndulla. The Empire has sent one of its most formidable strategists to test my defenses." "Grand Admiral Thrawn," Hera breathed, recognizing the description. Her history with the brilliant Imperial commander had left its scars. If he's leading this assault, it won't be a simple show of force. He'll have studied your abilities, identified vulnerabilities. Then he shall learn, as others before him, that understanding my power is not the same as defeating it," Magneto replied with cold confidence. He turned to his lieutenants who had entered the chamber. "Activate defense pattern Omega. Evacuate non-combatants to the lower levels. Deploy the magnetic shields." As the citadel transformed around them into a war footing, Hera made a swift decision. "We'll help defend against this attack. Whatever our philosophical differences, neither of us wishes to see Thrawn victorious today." Magneto inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Your assistance is welcome, though perhaps unexpected. There is a command center 2 levels below where your tactical expertise would be valuable." He turned to leave, his cape billowing behind him. "I must confront this threat personally." As Magneto ascended to the citadel's apex, the full scope of the Imperial assault became clear. A flotilla of Star Destroyers had emerged from hyperspace, arrayed in Thrawn's signature deployment pattern designed not to overwhelm with brute force, but to control space, predict enemy movements, and close off escape routes. At the center of the formation was the Chimera, Thrawn's flagship, its hull adorned with the stylized creature that gave the vessel its name. Unlike the battle at Kashyyyk, this was no chance encounter, but a carefully planned operation led by one of the Empire's most brilliant minds. Magneto reached the amplification chamber at the Citadel's peak. Here, Kyber crystals arranged in precise geometric patterns enhanced his magnetic powers exponentially. Placing his hands on the central control node, he extended his senses outward, feeling the Imperial fleet as a massive collection of metal and energy signatures. "Let us see what strategy the Empire's vaunted Grand Admiral has devised," he murmured, reaching out with his enhanced powers toward the nearest Star Destroyer. To his surprise, the vessel's hull resisted his magnetic manipulation. It still responded, but sluggishly, as if coated with some form of dampening material. A quick scan of the other ships revealed the same modification, not enough to render them immune to his abilities, but sufficient to require greater effort to affect them. "Clever," Magneto acknowledged. "They've adapted their technology based on the Kashyyyk encounter." It was a reminder not to underestimate Imperial resourcefulness, even as he prepared to demonstrate the depth of his own power. Aboard the Chimera's bridge, Grand Admiral Thrawn observed the initial exchange with characteristic calm. His red eyes gleamed as sensor data confirmed his theories about Magneto's abilities. "The magnetic shielding is performing as expected, Admiral," reported Commander Farrow. "The target's attempts to manipulate our vessels have been reduced in effectiveness by approximately 67%. Thrawn nodded, his blue-skinned face impassive. "A significant improvement, but not a solution. We have merely bought time." He studied the tactical display where Magneto's fortress was represented as a pulsing nexus of energy. "Launch the first wave of TIE defenders. Have them maintain distance and probe the outer defensive perimeter. I wish to observe how our adversary responds to multiple small targets versus capital ships." As the specialized TIE fighters streaked toward Raxus Prime, Thrawn turned his attention to a display showing various artifacts and historical records. Unlike most Imperial officers who relied solely on military intelligence, Thrawn studied the art, culture, and history of his opponents, believing these revealed essential truths about how they thought and fought. "Fascinating," he murmured, examining records of Magneto's fortress construction. The architectural elements incorporate motifs reminiscent of ancient Mandalorian strongholds, yet with flourishes that have no parallel in our galaxy. A being from another reality indeed, with a warrior's understanding of defense and symbol. On Raxus Prime, Magneto tracked the approaching TI squadrons with grim amusement. These fighters were different from those he had encountered previously, faster, more heavily armed, with reinforced hulls that suggested they too had been modified to resist his powers. Probing attacks, he assessed, testing my response patterns. It was a classic military strategy, one he had seen employed by adversaries from Bolivar Trask to Charles Xavier when the latter was forced to oppose him. Send expendable forces first, analyze the response, then adjust the main assault accordingly. Magneto decided to offer a response that would confound conventional analysis. Rather than attacking the fighters directly, he reached deeper into the scrapyard surrounding his fortress. Tons of metal debris rose into the air, forming a defensive cloud around the citadel. The cloud began to rotate, slowly at first, then with increasing speed until it became a swirling vortex of jagged metal. The TIE pilots, confronted with this unexpected obstacle, adjusted their approach vectors. Some attempted to penetrate the vortex, only to have their ships torn apart by the maelstrom of debris. Others maintained distance, launching proton torpedoes that detonated harmlessly against the whirling barrier. Magneto smiled coldly. Let Thrawn analyze that. In the command center below, Hera and her crew worked alongside Magneto's lieutenants to coordinate the defense of the lower approaches. The Ghost crew's experience with Imperial tactics proved invaluable as they anticipated and countered standard attack procedures. They're deploying landing craft, Sabine reported, pointing to signatures approaching from multiple vectors. Trying to establish ground positions around the perimeter. Coda nodded. Standard Imperial doctrine when dealing with a fortified position. Establish a containment perimeter, then tighten the noose. The Zabrak turned to Hera. Your experience with this Thrawn, what ground tactics should we expect? He'll use terrain to his advantage. Hera replied, studying the topography. Those ridgelines to the east provide cover for artillery. The southern approach allows for walker deployment. She pointed to several locations. If I were planning this assault, I'd position heavy weapons here, here, and here to create overlapping fields of fire. Coda relayed these insights to the defense coordinators, who began repositioning their forces accordingly. Magneto's followers moved with disciplined efficiency, their magnetically enhanced weapons and armor giving them advantages that standard rebel troops lacked. Meanwhile, Thrawn had noted the unexpected defense strategy with interest. The swirling debris field effectively neutralized his fighter screen, while simultaneously preventing precise targeting from his capital ships. It was an elegant solution that utilized the unique environment of Raxus Prime itself. Adjust targeting parameters, Thrawn ordered. Calculate the rotation pattern of the debris field and time our turbo-laser volleys to exploit any gaps or thinning points. As the Star Destroyers began a more coordinated bombardment, Thrawn turned to a specialized team of Imperial scientists and engineers. Deploy the disruptor satellites. Place them according to the calculated harmonic points in the magnetic field. A series of small satellites launched from the Chimera, maneuvering to specific positions around Raxus Prime. Once in place, they activated, generating interference patterns designed to disrupt the Kyber-enhanced magnetic field Magneto had established. The effect was immediate and significant. Magneto felt the disruption as a painful dissonance in his magnetic senses, like hearing multiple discordant notes simultaneously. His control over the debris field wavered, creating temporary gaps that Imperial gunners quickly exploited. Turbo-laser fire penetrated the weakened defenses, striking the outer sections of Magneto's fortress. Structures designed to withstand conventional attacks buckled under the precisely targeted barrage. The Citadel's automatic defenses responded, massive turrets rising from concealed positions to return fire, but the damage had been done. Magneto grimaced, realizing that this Imperial commander had somehow identified a fundamental vulnerability in his Kyber amplification network. The disruptor satellites were generating counter-frequencies that interfered with the harmonic resonance of his system, not enough to neutralize it completely, but sufficient to reduce its effectiveness. A worthy opponent indeed, Magneto acknowledged. Rather than attempting to maintain the compromised debris field, he shifted tactics. Focusing his powers more narrowly, he targeted the disruptor satellites directly, attempting to crush them one by one. The satellites proved surprisingly resilient, their construction incorporating non-metallic components specifically designed to resist magnetic manipulation. Still, they were machines, with power systems and circuitry that could not be completely shielded. Magneto strained against their defenses, gradually overcoming the countermeasures to destroy several key nodes in the disruption network. As the magnetic field stabilized, Magneto seized the opportunity to launch a counterattack. Reaching out to the damaged sections of his fortress, he reformed the metal, not merely repairing the structures, but transforming them into massive projectiles. Chunks of processed metal the size of small starships accelerated toward the Imperial fleet, their trajectories calculated to bypass point defense systems. The Star Destroyers attempted evasive maneuvers, but the projectiles adjusted course in mid-flight, guided by Magneto's magnetic control. Several struck their targets with devastating force, penetrating hull sections and causing cascading internal damage. One destroyer listed heavily to port as its stabilization systems failed, secondary explosions blossoming along its superstructure. Aboard the Chimera, Thrawn observed the counterattack with analytical detachment. Fascinating. He sacrifices his own defenses to launch an offensive. The Grand Admiral's crimson eyes narrowed, a calculated risk that reveals much about his priorities. Commander Faro, prepare the ground forces for assault. The moment has come to test another aspect of our strategy. As Imperial landing craft descended toward Raxus Prime's surface, they deployed not the expected complement of stormtroopers, but specialized units equipped with distinctive armor. These troopers moved with the coordination of elite soldiers but carried unusual weapons, staff-like devices that emitted pulses of energy rather than conventional blaster fire. In the command center, Sabine zoomed in on the approaching forces and cursed under her breath. Purge troopers, she identified, and they're carrying some kind of modified electrostaff designed for combat against Force users, Hera frowned. Thrawn thinks Magneto's abilities are similar enough to Force powers that anti-Jedi tactics might be effective. He may be partially correct, acknowledged Dr. Ryvane, who had joined them to monitor the battle's energy signatures. Our studies suggest Magneto's connection to Kyber crystals creates resonances not unlike Force attunement. These weapons might indeed disrupt his control at close range. The ground battle erupted with ferocious intensity as Magneto's forces engaged the specialized Imperial units. The Purge troopers proved formidable opponents, their weapons capable of temporarily neutralizing magnetically enhanced equipment and creating localized dead zones where Magneto's influence was weakened. From his position in the amplification chamber, Magneto felt these disruptions as pinpricks in his extended awareness, small but growing blind spots in his magnetic senses. The Imperial strategy was becoming clear. Use the disruptor satellites to weaken his broader control, while ground forces established nullification zones that could be gradually expanded. It was a sophisticated approach, one that suggested this Grand Admiral Thrawn had developed a dangerously accurate understanding of how his powers functioned. Left unchecked, the strategy could potentially isolate his fortress from the Kyber amplification network entirely. Magneto made a swift decision. This battle could not be won through conventional defense. It required a more dramatic demonstration of power, one that would force the Empire to reconsider the wisdom of direct confrontation. Dr. Ryvane, he communicated through the fortress's internal systems. Initiate Protocol Polaris. Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the secondary facilities. In the command center, Dr. Ravain's expression became grave as she received the order. "Understood, Master Magneto. Protocol Polaris initiated." She turned to Hera and her crew. "You should return to your ship immediately. The Citadel will no longer be safe." Hera sensed the urgency behind the scientist's words. "What is Protocol Polaris?" "A last resort," Dr. Ravain replied simply. "One that will demonstrate why the Empire should fear rather than challenge the Master of Magnetism." As the Ghost crew hurried back to their ship, the Citadel began to transform around them. Metal walls flowed like liquid, reinforcing some sections while thinning others. The entire structure seemed to be reconfiguring itself according to some complex design. Aboard the Chimera, Thrawn noted the unusual activity with growing concern. Energy readings from the fortress were spiking in patterns that defied conventional analysis. The Grand Admiral quickly reviewed the historical data his team had compiled on Magneto's previous demonstrations of power. "Withdraw the ground forces," he ordered suddenly. "All ships, prepare to increase distance from the target." Commander Faro looked startled. "Sir, our forces are making significant progress on the ground. They are exactly where our opponent wishes them to be," Thrawn replied. "This being does not think like a conventional military commander. He thinks like an artist seeing patterns and possibilities others cannot." The Grand Admiral's expression remained calm, but there was a new tension in his voice. "We have pushed him to unveil a masterpiece we are not prepared to witness." Before the withdrawal order could be fully implemented, Magneto made his move. Standing at the center of the amplification chamber, he called upon every kyber crystal in his network simultaneously. The crystals responded, resonating with his magnetic field and with each other, creating a cascading amplification effect that surpassed anything he had attempted before. The magnetic field surrounding Raxus Prime intensified exponentially, becoming visible as rippling waves of energy that distorted light itself. The planet's natural magnetic field, normally weak and inconsequential, suddenly aligned with Magneto's power, adding planetary-scale forces to his command. Magneto raised his arms, embracing the torrent of power flowing through him. The sensation was both exhilarating and painful, like channeling a star's worth of energy through his body. With supreme effort, he directed this power outward, targeting not the Imperial ships themselves but the space around them. The fabric of reality seemed to warp as Magneto manipulated the fundamental electromagnetic forces that helped bind the universe together. Space itself distorted around the Imperial fleet, creating localized gravity wells that pulled the Star Destroyers off course. Navigation systems failed as magnetic interference scrambled sensor readings. Power cores fluctuated wildly as the energy flowing through their systems was redirected or amplified beyond safe parameters. Two Star Destroyers collided as their helmsmen lost control, their hulls crumpling against each other in a catastrophic impact. Others found themselves being inexorably drawn toward Raxus Prime's surface, fighting against gravitational forces that suddenly seemed to defy natural law. The Chimera itself shuddered as Thrawn ordered maximum power to engines in an attempt to break free of the magnetic maelstrom. The Grand Admiral stood calmly amid the chaos of his bridge, studying the phenomenon with the detached interest of a scientist observing a rare natural event. "Remarkable," he murmured. "He has found a way to amplify his abilities to affect not just metal, but the electromagnetic spectrum itself. Perhaps even the underlying structure of space-time." He turned to his second in command. "Commander Faro, we have achieved our primary objective. We now understand the true scope of this being's capabilities." "Sir, 3 destroyers are on collision courses with the surface," Faro reported urgently. "Casualties will be extreme if signal all ships to power down primary systems," Thrawn ordered. "Maintain only life support and minimal thrusters. Reduce our electromagnetic signature to absolute minimum." The counterintuitive order spread throughout the fleet. As ships complied, powering down weapons, shields, and propulsion systems, the effect of Magneto's attack diminished. Without active energy systems generating their own magnetic fields, The vessels presented less prominent targets for his powers. It was not a complete solution. The massive metal hulls still responded to his magnetic control, but it reduced his leverage significantly, allowing the Imperial ships to gradually stabilize their positions. On Raxus Prime, Magneto felt the change in the Imperial strategy and allowed himself a grim smile, despite the physical toll of maintaining such power. This Thrawn was indeed adaptable, finding a way to mitigate an attack that should have been devastating. Nevertheless, the demonstration had served its purpose. The battle had reached a stalemate. Thrawn's forces could not advance without reactivating systems that would make them vulnerable to Magneto's powers. Magneto, meanwhile, could not indefinitely sustain the tremendous energy expenditure required to maintain his attack at planetary scale. As if acknowledging this impasse, a communication request came through from the Chimera. Magneto accepted, and a holographic image of Grand Admiral Thrawn appeared before him, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid with glowing red eyes that studied him with unsettling intensity. "Master Magneto," Thrawn greeted him with formal respect. "I am Grand Admiral Thrawn of the Imperial Navy. I believe we have reached a point where continued hostilities serve neither of our interests." Magneto regarded the hologram coolly. "You initiated this attack, Admiral. Did you expect me to surrender to Imperial authority?" "I expected precisely what you delivered," Thrawn replied. "A demonstration of capabilities that our intelligence could not fully quantify through second-hand reports. Now I understand the nature of your power more completely." "And what will you do with this understanding?" Magneto challenged. "Return with greater forces? More specialized countermeasures?" Thrawn's expression remained impassive. "I will report to my superiors that direct military confrontation with your magnetic order presents an unfavorable cost-benefit ratio. The resources required to overcome your defenses would exceed the strategic value of Raxus Prime itself." It was a coldly logical assessment, one that Magneto found he could respect even coming from an adversary. "So you propose a ceasefire?" "I propose recognition of practical realities," Thrawn corrected. "Your domain ends at the boundaries of your magnetic influence. The Empire's interests extend to millions of worlds beyond your reach. There is room for coexistence, provided certain accommodations are made." Magneto sensed the diplomatic opening, calculated yet genuine. "What accommodations does the Empire propose?" "Containment rather than confrontation," Thrawn answered. "You maintain your authority within defined borders. The Empire acknowledges your autonomy within those borders. In return, you cease raids on Imperial shipping and facilities beyond your territory." It was not capitulation but pragmatism, the recognition that some opponents could not be defeated without unacceptable losses. Magneto had encountered similar situations on Earth, times when even sworn enemies had been forced to establish uneasy truces in the face of mutual destruction. "Your Emperor would accept such an arrangement?" Magneto asked skeptically. "My understanding of Palpatine suggests he does not tolerate independent powers within his domain." A subtle expression crossed Thrawn's features, not quite a smile, but something approaching acknowledgement. "The Emperor is a pragmatist above all. He recognizes that resources deployed against your order are resources unavailable for use against the rebellion." Magneto considered the proposal. A defined territory would provide stability for his followers, time to consolidate his power and expand his understanding of this galaxy's unique physics. It was not the ultimate victory he might have envisioned, but neither was it defeat. "I will consider your proposal, Admiral Thrawn," he finally replied. "Withdraw your forces from this system as a demonstration of good faith. I shall communicate my decision within 3 standard days." Thrawn inclined his head. "The Empire will await your response." The hologram flickered and disappeared. As the Imperial fleet gradually disengaged, powering up systems only when safely beyond the range of Magneto's enhanced abilities, the Master of Magnetism allowed himself to release the tremendous energy he had been channeling. The effort left him drained, but not defeated. This had been merely one battle in what promised to be a long campaign. The Ghost, which had remained in orbit around Raxus Prime, observing the confrontation, received permission to return to the surface. When Hera and her crew disembarked, they found Magneto waiting for them in a chamber that showed signs of hasty repairs, the metal walls still settling into their final configurations. "It seems your Grand Admiral Thrawn is a more subtle adversary than most who wear the Imperial uniform," Magneto observed as they entered. "He offers truce rather than demanding surrender." Hera's expression was guarded. "Thrawn is dangerous precisely because he's reasonable. He presents logical arguments for Imperial control, making subjugation seem like the rational choice. Yet, you appear concerned by the prospect of peace between my order and the Empire," Magneto noted. "Peace built on Imperial recognition legitimizes their authority," Hera countered. "The Alliance fights not for accommodation with tyranny, but for its complete dismantling." Magneto studied her with newfound respect. Despite their differences in approach, there was an ideological purity to her position that reminded him of his own uncompromising stance against human oppression of mutants. "Rest assured, Captain Syndulla, I harbor no illusions about the Empire's ultimate intentions," he said after a moment. "Thrawn offers this arrangement not out of respect for my sovereignty, but because direct confrontation has proven costly. It is a tactical retreat, not a strategic concession." "Then why consider it at all?" Hera challenged. "Because time favors my cause," Magneto explained. "Each day allows me to extend my understanding of this galaxy's kyber crystals, to refine my control of magnetic forces in ways unique to this reality." He gestured to the fortress around them. "What you witnessed today was but a fraction of what I will eventually achieve." The implications hung in the air between them, the suggestion that Magneto's power would continue to grow, potentially beyond anything the galaxy had witnessed before. It was both reassuring and troubling from the rebellion's perspective. An ally of such capability could turn the tide against the Empire, but at what cost to the future they hoped to build? "Where does this leave our discussions of alliance?" Hera asked finally. "At a crossroads," Magneto admitted. "Your rebellion seeks to restore what was lost. My order aims to create something new. Our paths run parallel for now, converging against a common enemy." He extended his hand in a gesture of respect, if not complete agreement. "I propose we maintain communication and cooperation where our interests align, while acknowledging the differences in our ultimate vision." Hera considered his words carefully before accepting the gesture. "The rebellion has worked with independent powers before. We can establish protocols for shared intelligence and coordinated actions against Imperial targets." "A pragmatic beginning," Magneto agreed. "Perhaps in time, as we face common challenges, our visions for the future may find greater harmony." As the rebel delegation prepared to depart, Magneto presented them with a gift, a small communication device of his own design. Its interior workings a marvel of magnetic engineering, enhanced by kyber crystal technology. "This will allow secure contact between us, beyond Imperial ability to intercept," he explained. "Should either of us face existential threat from the Empire, the other will know." The gesture was symbolic as well as practical, a recognition that despite philosophical differences, both the Magnetic Order and the Rebellion stood opposed to Imperial domination. It was not a formal alliance, but it was a step toward cooperation that might one day evolve into something more substantial. After the Ghost departed, Magneto returned to his private chambers deep within the Citadel. The battle had taken its toll, leaving him physically drained and mentally exhausted. Yet there was satisfaction in what had been accomplished, his power demonstrated, his domain defended, his position in this new galaxy established beyond question. On the wall of his chamber hung a piece of metal artwork he had crafted during his first days on Raxus Prime, a stylized representation of Earth's continents, a reminder of the world he had left behind. Beside it now hung a new creation, a map of this galaxy with Raxus Prime marked as a bright point of light amid the darkness. "Not the end," Magneto murmured to himself, "merely a new beginning." In the days that followed, as repairs to the fortress continued and plans were made for the future of the Magnetic Order, Magneto often found himself contemplating the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this distant galaxy. Had it been mere cosmic accident, or was there purpose in his displacement? Either way, the result was the same, a new battlefield for his lifelong crusade against oppression, with new allies and enemies to define the struggle. The Empire would return eventually, of that he had no doubt. Whether led by Thrawn's calculated strategy, Vader's implacable will, or the Emperor's dark mastery, Imperial forces would not permanently cede territory to a power they could not control. When that day came, Magneto would be ready, his abilities enhanced, his followers prepared, his resolve unbroken. And perhaps, by then, the seeds of alliance with the rebellion would have blossomed into a true partnership, one that could challenge Imperial might across multiple fronts. The galaxy was vast, but tyranny could not endure forever against the combined forces of resistance. As twilight fell over Raxus Prime, Magneto stood at the highest point of his citadel, gazing upward at unfamiliar stars. Somewhere among them, the future of this galaxy was being decided in countless small confrontations between freedom and subjugation. His arrival had altered the balance of that struggle in ways that were still unfolding. The metal beneath his feet hummed with potential energy, responsive to his slightest thought. The kyber crystals embedded throughout his domain resonated with his magnetic signature, extending his awareness across space in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. This was not the Earth he had known, with its endless cycle of conflict between humans and mutants. This was a galaxy of infinite possibility, where the fundamental forces themselves could be bent to his will. "Let them come," he whispered to the distant stars, a promise and a challenge carried on the magnetic currents that were his to command. "Let them all come. They will find that magnetism is the true force that binds the universe." And in the silence that followed, the master of magnetism felt the galaxy itself respond, currents of destiny shifting around him like metal shavings aligning to a powerful field. The story of Magneto in the Star Wars galaxy had only just begun.